Today we have a very profound topic, a very profound thing that God has actually given us to learn at this very moment. And what we want to learn is the life of impact. How can someone have a life that leave a legacy? And how can someone have a life that leaves a footprint that can actually almost never be erased from the history? What really makes when two people dies, what actually causes someone to be forgotten just immediately? And what makes another person to be remembered like in all ages? The reason is the life that they lived during their days. Because actually, the value of life is not in how old did you live, but it is in how effectively was your life. So now we say that the value of life is not measured by duration, but rather it is measured by donation. The issue it is not how old, the issue is how effective. What did you do with your life? That's what actually determines will you be remembered or you'll just be forgotten. Will you leave a footprint, or when you die, people will say, oh, at least finally, God had released a burden from us? That's something to think. Because if you don't live an effective life, a life with impact, that means you are having a meaningless life. And not only meaningless, it can also be burdensome. You are burdening others. Maybe if you are a kid, you are burdening your parents. They can't tell you, of course, but the way you behave, you might really be a burden. Maybe you are a husband, but the way you live, you are really a burden to your wife. And the wife is in silent prayer saying, oh God, if you ever release this burden from me. And when God takes you, the wife will give a thanksgiving in the church. She will go with an offering and saying, oh, finally. I hate to say this, but it's a reality, so I have to say it. Sometimes during the funerals, not every person who is crying because they are sad. No, sometimes some people, it is a joyful cry. Finally, Lord, finally, Jehovah, finally. A joyful cry. Because a burden has been released. And this is caused by how do you live your life? It determines is it effectively or it's just an existing life. So actually today, when we are pondering this, I want to concentrate on what I call the great questions of life. If you have to have a life of impact, if you want to have a life that leave a legacy, if you want to live a life that leaves behind meaningful footprints, there are five great questions that you will have to answer. And these five questions, they determine how you live your life. These five questions, they determine how you use your days. These five questions, they determine how you use your time, how you use your money. These five questions, they determine where you are investing your energy. These five questions, they determine whether your life will be meaningful, a blessing, or a burden. These five questions are the ones that determine when you die, God will tell you, well done, good and faithful servant. Or God will ask you, what did you do? Because of these five questions. Question number one, who am I? Every person who wants to live a life of impact, they need to answer this question. Who am I? And who am I is a question of identity. It's a question of uniqueness. It's a question of personal revelation. It's a question of knowing the true identity of yourself. Because if you don't know yourself, there is higher much possibility of living identity of other people. Or sometimes you might take your identity from your money, status, career, sexual relationship, possessions, or titles, and you think that is who you are. Or sometimes you might think your name is who you are, but I'm telling you, who you are is that core identity, the specific identity that God gave to you when you came to earth. How God knows you, that's your true identity. Not how your academic performance has built you, not how much money you're having. No. Who you are is actually revealed by knowing who created you. And in knowing who you are, there is actually this principle that we say this. We put it this way. If you want to understand who you are, you have to understand whose you are. Let me put this. Let me put it properly. If you want to know who you are, the very first thing you have to know is whose you are. Because you are actually not the owner of yourself. Every person on earth, whether you are a believer or not, it doesn't matter. You are owned by God. You were created by God. Whether you believe in this nonsense called evolution, that you were once a tadpole, a fish, or whatever, then a monkey, and now then you grown into being a human being. Whether you believe into that nonsense or not, you were created by God. So before knowing who you are, you have first to know whose you are. So you have to know God. Because our true identity is not found anywhere except in God. So when we know God is when we get to know ourselves. It is actually fruitless efforts to try to discover our identity outside of God's presence. Doing efforts to find our identity in money, in status, in titles, in possessions, in materials, it's actually fruitless because our identity is not found there. Our identity is actually found in God. So if we want to know who we are, you know where to start. You start with God. When you start with God, then you go step by step, step by step. As you go with God, He gradually reveals to you. He reveals to you gradually who you are. So you will eventually come to know the full identity of yourself from God. Outside of God, there is no clear identity of you. There is no. And this is not option. Maybe you do God or you do other things. No. It's God and only God. You want to know yourself? Brother, sister, mother, father, you want to know yourself? There is a place where our identity is, and that is in God's presence. That's where we know ourselves. We come to discover ourselves after knowing God. And the more you know God, is the more you know yourself. That's how it is. That's a principle. Know God more, then you get to know yourself. If you don't know yourself, or if you live your life without answering this question of who you are, you'll be living a life of copy and paste. Copying and paste. You are imitating other people's life. You see how people live and you want to be like them. You see a great artist, maybe a singer or a movie actor or a great football player, and you start to imitate them. You want to be like them simply because you haven't discovered your identity. You don't know who you are. Actually, the value of life is hidden in your identity. Every question that we will try to answer later on, it is built on this foundation. Let me tell you something. The danger of trying to find or to look for your identity in these materials, like I've said, money, status, sexual relationship, or titles, possessions, all of those things. If you put your identity in those things, that means you will be having identity that changes. Because actually, these things are unstable. Today you have money, tomorrow you don't have. Then what will you do if your identity was in money? Oh, you said because I married this one, then my identity is because of the person I'm in love with. Then what will be your identity when they leave you? Because these things are unstable. You know, status is unstable. The title you're having today, tomorrow you don't have it. What will it be your identity when you are fired? Okay, let's say, good. Today you are a manager. And tomorrow you're fired. What's your identity then? Because today you'll brag, oh, I'm a manager. I'm a CEO, man. You know, cool, man. It's cool, man. I'm a CEO, you know. Okay, well, what will be your identity when you're fired? If you have a lot of money, you say, who are you? Who are you? You say, oh, I'm rich. When you go bankrupt, what will be your identity? So you will come to know that having identity that is built on these things, it's actually unstable. It's very changing. And it is not reliable because you are having identity on unstable foundation. That's why I've said the perfect place where you have to find your identity is in God. Because actually, money changes. God, it doesn't. Status changes. Oh, God, it doesn't. Titles changes. God, it doesn't. Relationship changes. But God doesn't. So the identity of who you are, you have to find it in unchangeable foundation, in the stable and firm foundation, which is actually God. So you want to know who you are? I'm giving you a secret. Start with God. Before knowing who you are, start knowing whose you are. Thank you.